Hey, welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about 7th chords. First off, we're going to talk about how to actually just build one. And then after that, we're going to be talking about 3 different ways to think about them. And then I'm going to use that third and final way of structuring our 7th chords to show you the inspiration behind my Etude No.1 in A major. All right, let's get after it. All right, so as promised, we're going to discuss how to build a basic 7th chord. So as I mentioned, we're going to be using Etude No.1 in A major, so we better know what A major is. So A major starts on A. Now in that key, I have 3 sharps. What that means is that these 3 notes replace these 3 notes. So as I'm building my chords, anything that involves a C, F, or G will not be one of these notes, but instead one of these. So we're going to start from a D chord because that's actually the first chord in the song. So before we can build a 7th chord, we need to know how to build a basic chord, which is called a triad. It's made up of 3 notes. Since I'm starting on D, D is known as the root, or a number that we could think of as 1. So it's the first note. A basic triad is built on a root, or a 1, a third, and a fifth. So all that means is if D is 1, I'm going to count up to 3 and then up to 5. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now this is a basic D chord or triad. However, I need to remember that in the key of A, this note is replaced by this note. So the D chord in the key of A is that, which is a D major. Okay, so we have a root or a 1. So 1, 2, 3, a third, 4, 5. So a root, a third, and a fifth. The 7th chord adds a 7th to the triad. So where I have a root, a third, and a fifth, if this is 5, I'm going to count up to 7. 6, 7. Well, it turns out, again, in the key of A, or in an A major scale, C is sharp. So the 7th chord on D is actually this. So again, we have a root or a 1 to a third, a fifth, and a 7. This is the first way of thinking of a 7th chord. You start from your first note and you build the 4-note chord. This is pretty much typically the way that it is taught in your music theory class on how to build a 7th chord, is this first way. I want to break this down into something that I think is a little bit more interesting about these. It turns out that as I'm holding this down, I'm actually holding 2 separate triads, so 2 separate 3-note chords. So we started out building our D chord with our root, a third, and our fifth, but it turns out that if I let go of this note, this chord is a triad as well. This is an F sharp minor. And you can actually see I have my root or my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is still a root, third, and a fifth. So in kind of a fun way, if I separate those 2 chords like this, it almost acts as something you call a polychord, where you have 1 chord down here and another chord up here. But those notes together still create that 7th chord built off of a D. And I can actually mix those up. So here I have the D chord on the bottom, the F sharp chord up on top. What if I wanted to switch them? That's kind of a cool sound. But the interesting thing about this is that whether I play it like this or like this, it's the same chord. Because the D7 chord, or the 7th chord built off of D, you need to be careful. This is actually a D major 7. I'm not going to break that down right now. But this 7th chord built off of D, these 4 notes combined in any order make up that chord. because I have tons of Ds, tons of F sharps, As, and C sharps, which are the 4 notes I'm playing here, all over the piano. So if I wanted to play my D and my C sharp here, and my A and my F sharp here, still that D major 7 chord. Very interesting. So again, the second way we think about it is 2 separate triads, because in that D major 7, I have my D major and an F sharp minor. If I combine them, that makes that D major 7. So the third way that I want to think about this is actually breaking this down even more. Because if I eliminate thinking about this as a triad, I could actually think about this as 2 fifths. And I'm going to explain that. A fifth is just that when we were building that triad, we had the root, the third, and the fifth. That distance of a fifth just eliminates the third. This is actually a really popular way of playing a chord in rock music. And if you were playing it on guitar, it would be something called a power chord, but it's essentially just a fifth. And you've heard this song so many times. Just things moving in fifths. It's like every rock song ever, or every punk rock song. Now, think about the fact that I removed that root, third, fifth, so I removed the third and just played the fifth. If I play all that progression, including the thirds of those chords, suddenly that makes those chords sound a lot more poppy or alternative than it does rock and roll, because rock and roll eliminates that third note so much of the time. So the reason I bring that up is that the way that I thought about these 7th chords when I was writing the Etude No.1 in A major was, instead of thinking about it like a root note building a 7th, or even 2 separate triads, I thought about it as separate fifths, like this. So if I just played the left-hand line in fifths with an octave, it would sound like this. And the same thing with the right hand. If I played just the right-hand line with the fifth and the octave, now by themselves, it's not that it doesn't sound good, but it's not necessarily interesting. But the amazing thing is if you combine them, suddenly you have this very rich sound. So I just think that that just sounds so full when you combine those fifths. So all I did was I thought about the fact that I've got a fifth here and a fifth here. Now, anybody that knows music theory, they're going to think, no, duh. But it is a very fun way to think about it. So I could either just build my 7th chord like this and just think about it as a combination of notes built off of this note. Or I could think about it a little bit more broadly where I could separate them. And then even more simplified, just the fifths. And all I did throughout the whole piece of music is combine them like that. So there you go. You have a 4-note chord that you can build off of a single root. We could think about it as 2 separate chords, or break it down even more as 2 separate fifths. And by the way, I mentioned that in rock music, it's built on fifths a lot. So you rock and roll songwriters out there, you might try actually having 2 separate musicians playing power chords that are what you call a third apart, playing those. And you'll sound completely different than any other rock band. All right, well, I hope this was informative. Don't forget to subscribe. Please like the video if you can. It really helps me out. And feel free to share it as well. Just like any other video that I've posted, below you'll have a link to the sheet music of my etude if you'd like to learn how to play it. And I'll see you next time.